You're already recording?
You're like, okay, we're live. Be careful, we're recorded. You get to choose a color for the background. Would you like red, orange, green, blue?
Let's go blue.
Blue.
Are your glasses fade into it if I do blue?
They go away. It's like a green screen.
You know what those remind me of?
What? Now I will cut this down, but tell me, JT Benton. JT Benton.
Remind me of the popular television show Designing Women. Yeah.
I would laugh harder, but it's the 5th time he's told me.
You are the only person I know who bought his glasses at the dress barn.
Hey everybody, it is Rob Seaver. I'm here this week with an on-air podcast with one of my absolute favorites in the industry. And the reason I say this is it's simple. This guy got me into this industry, and he's the reason why I am sitting in this chair being able to do this podcast with this guy, JT Benton. JT, thank you for spending time with me today. I cannot understand where this is going to go. I don't even know where it's going to go. I'm not even going to try to pretend I know where this is going to go. We are just going to try to wing it and enjoy it, and hopefully people will get something out of this. But JT, buddy, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Rob, you know, you're not going to make me many friends by saying I got you into this industry, but I'll hopefully folks won't hold that against me. You've done amazing work, and it was awesome to be kind of part of the bridge that got you here. But you deserve all the credit. Hey, I'm thrilled to be here, honored to be here, and so stoked to
well, I certainly appreciate
chat about
this.
whatever we're going to chat about. And
we're going to go through a world of things today. What I can tell the audience right now, you've watched a few of these already. You understand that I just want to understand who that other person on the other side is. I wanted this to be with JT mainly because he's a guy that's I've done probably 8 of these on airs, and a handful of the people who are leaders in this space have talked about JT Benton somewhere in the DNA of their career. And so I had held off having JT just mainly because I wanted to get this thing right. I wanted it to feel right. And here we are today. JT, look, I came into your world, and I'll back up and let people know how I came into this world with you. I was working with Gannett. I was doing B2B inbound lead generation, and must have had that on my LinkedIn profile. I have no idea. I know that we asked the question at one point, but I got this call from a guy, JT Benton. I have no idea who this guy was. And he said he was scaling up a shop in Tempe and wanted me to come in and do some lead bound with him. And I had no idea what he wanted me to do, but I will tell you that he had me within hours over in Tempe, Arizona, walking around the streets of Tempe, talking about my career. What was that?
we went for a walk, didn't we?
I don't know if that's your MO or if that's your normal, like, you know, how you interview people, but we did. We walked and we walked. And for a boy my little size, walking in the streets of Tempe was a pleasure, I will tell you. But I got to know this guy, and he got to know me, and quickly it was something very clear to both of us that this was something that would work out. And I dropped what I was doing very quickly and came over and had one of the best, shortest runs that I've ever had in my career. And all I can tell you is that I learned so much in a very short period of time from JT, and I saw his influence. I saw how he treated people. I saw the knowledge that he brought to the table. And I also saw a little bit of myself in him, and just the tenacity and the eagerness and just the on fire that he is in this space. And so I'm hoping in the next 45 minutes that we can get to that. And JT, first of all, like, I know because as I worked for you as a marketer, you hit me on every comma that I got wrong, right and left. Help me understand, like, what's that background? What's the education? Where did you come from? I know when I go to Tempe the name JT Benton and the Bentons, they're known around that area. What was life like? How did you grow up? Why did you go to school? Did you go to ASU? Was that what it was? I'm thinking. No.
You just asked me a bunch of questions and said a lot of really nice things. Let's just go back to those compliments.
I know you're about the compliments. I can continue to give them, but
so
where did you go to school and why? And Tempe, what does that mean to you? I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
Sure, man. So I grew up in Tempe, and I have lived in 3 homes, I think, maybe 4 one more when I was really little in Tempe. And 2 of them I've lived in as an adult. I bought the house I grew up in as a young boy when I got out of college. And then a few years later, I bought the house that I really grew up in from my parents. We built a cottage for them in the backyard. Family's just everything to me. And so is my community. You know, I kind of call 2 places home, Tempe, Arizona, and a little community in Nova Scotia that we go to in the summer. But look, man, where you're from is like so critical a part of the DNA. It's not just who raised you, but it's like the village that came up around you. So Tempe is very much at my core. I'm so proud that our business is located in Tempe. I'm proud to be here. It's a small big city or a big small city or a big old little town. I don't know what the country music line is, but it's a neat place. And not just feel so fortunate to have been able to be here. For years, that represented an interesting employment challenge because it's not like a hotbed of digital marketing. It's really just a hotbed of heat, right? It's like 111 today.
It is very warm. Yes.
Man, got my car the other day. It was 129 degrees in my Jeep.
Yes.
Brutal, right? So, but it's a wonderful place. And, for years, I used to have to find jobs that were cool with the fact that I lived in Tempe and wasn't leaving. So, interestingly enough, that has aligned me with some really cool entrepreneurs, and interesting ones, right? So like, Sean Fenlon at Double Positive was the founder there, now is the founder and CEO of Bobo 42 and a sister company, Meta 42. Hired me on as an executive to help build and run a mobile division out of Tempe, and he kind of let me be to stay in that place, right? Traveled back and forth. Where you and I met thereafter was a company called LeadsCouncil, now called LQ Digital, and I think they really wanted a leader in Oakland or in Connecticut where their 2 headquarters were, but that wasn't where I was, and Tempe was so critical and core to me. And it remains that way. My last actual job, I was the chief revenue officer for an insurance company, and I was based in Boston, and I was commuting back and forth. I was on that red-eye flight on Sunday night to Boston from Phoenix, and I would land, dial into the company exec meeting, take a cab, and always get there in time, just in time to catch the last 30 minutes of that meeting and give my part of the presentation, and then back home Friday night, or sometimes if I got lucky Thursday night. And when that came to an end, I was like, man, I'm not leaving. But this working for other companies which are based elsewhere and convincing them that I should build here is draining, right? It's a lot of travel. And I think just in retrospect, at that point in time, I was just really ready to be an entrepreneur and do it on my own. I had been serving companies that had been venture backed or even private equity backed, as you and I experienced with the folks at in our time at LeadsCouncil. And it was great. You got all these resources. There's all this money. There's wonderful accountability and you're stewarding somebody else's resource. But man, I just wanted something that was going to be my own. So I built Workbook 6, and that was 4 years ago. We're a thriving young small business, bootstrapped, didn't raise any capital, still won't. knock on wood. Would have been easier. Certainly had lots of opportunities to, but it's a hell of a lot more fun when it's yours and you control it with your team. In my case, my business partner, who's a lot of folks know, Brett Kaufman. Tough little.
Love Brett. Yes.
Um,
What was that?
he's incredible. He's got a better beard than you right now. That thing's coming out the side.
Does
Anyway,
it?
just to wrap that up, you talked about my propensity to be and you said it politely, but my propensity to be a total pain in the ass on the written word. Man, I've lightened up a little bit, but not much. Writing is
I
really
found Grammarly a little bit.
probably a lot easier to befriend Grammarly than it was to deal with me pouring over your shoulder.
I sure wish it was available 3 or 4 years ago. Yes.
Man, writing is so important to me. And
is that what did you go to college for? I mean, what really, like, what did little boy JT Benton growing up in Tempe, Arizona, what were the dreams?
Well, I wanted to go to college so I could, raise hell and play football. And
Yeah.
maybe if I stumbled upon it long enough and found, didn't screw it up too bad, get a degree, which all worked out. Oh man, I went to an incredible school, like just an unbelievable school. I did not get my major in creative writing, but that's only because I discovered it later. I got my major in communications and did a lot of writing and public speaking for that, debate and acting, a bunch of other stuff. And just the most transformative guy, this professor of mine in college, and Greg Schwipps, who's an author and I think he chairs the creative writing department at DePauw now, but he was a young professor, and we just became fast friends. And he just like captivated my interest really, really early on the importance of saying things kind of the one best way. Right? Like it wasn't good enough to just say it like somebody else said it. So I got really intent on trying to avoid a cliche or a turn of phrase whenever possible and try to put it in my own words. Right? That was the first thing. That was like the first lesson. And the lesson, I think it was the first day of Creative Writing 101 at DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana. He handed us 2 sheets of paper. There were lyric sheets. One was from Dark Side of the Moon by
Pink Floyd.
No, sorry.
I was gonna say.
Not Dark Side of the Moon.
It is Dark Side of the Moon, though.
It was man, I can't remember it. It was a song that was just a run of cliches, and Dark Side of the Moon was one of them. I don't really care what happens now and then, as long as you'll be my friend in the end. That song, and I'll come up with it another time. Maybe we'll mention it in some.
I'll edit it back in.
And then he showed us some lyrics from Counting Crows. Steps into the room like I forgot the lyrics, but you could see on one hand somebody just took turns of phrase or common phrases and tried to fit them into this sort of rhythm of a song, and on the other hand you had poetry, you had original prose. And I went, man, like that's powerful, because we have this incredible gift as human beings to communicate, right? That and opposable thumbs are like what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. And it's what makes us able to do all these other things and different things and critical thought and everything else. And so I just became really obsessed with the quality of the written work that we put out and the way that we say things. And man, I'll tell you what, it's a double-edged sword. I think I really drive a lot of people crazy who work with me, who don't value that in that way because they just didn't have that moment in time. But for me, I just think it's a real gift that we get to be able to use this immense language that we have and these brains and to try to say things our way. So it's always been pretty important to me ever since then.
Well, man, I have to be honest with you. I mean, I'm going on record with, some of the other people that I've interviewed. I've had a lot of jobs, been in the Navy, air traffic control, I've owned my own company, print, mail shop, things of that nature. I've done database management. I've done coding, sales, marketing, finance, all of those roles under some hat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only when I came to work for you that I really appreciated the words that I used because one, you pointed it out so often, like, the hell are you thinking here? Or, you could say it this way. And so at the time it probably, and I don't know if you realized it at the time that you were getting that lesson or life lesson that you were learning, but you certainly can look back on it fondly and understand the impact that it's had on your life even today as you run companies and put your own content out. But at the time you were doing it, I probably did not appreciate it at the time as much as even in this role now, just a short period of years later, I'm using some of the same principles and some of that same philosophy that you pushed on me during that short period of time to try to make sure that every word that I write counts. Sundays, when I sit down to write the newsletter, every word counts. I pay attention to not only the grammatical side of it, because I think that was what you hit me on the most. I am an abuser of commas, but
Me
at
too.
the same, what's that?
Me too. I love them. I get called out for it all the time. I probably overuse commas, but I try to write like I speak.
That is where I am. But I do feel like, 80 commas in one sentence, maybe a bit over, and you pointed that out many times. But at this point in my life, every word matters. And coming from a person who loves to talk a lot, when I also want to regurgitate that into the written form, it does take some time for me to come back and scale that. Thankfully, Grammarly also has the ability to say, this is a bit long, Rob, maybe we can cut it back a bit. But I do take those things. And so I can only say I appreciate the fact that you did press me during those times. Even an old horse or an old dog can be taught new tricks. And so I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit about the transition because, I met you at a time where you came from Double Positive or had just come from Double Positive right before that. And I had no idea who they were. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
What I do know now is that there were a lot of people in this space that came and went into that area, and maybe Double Positive touched them at some level, whether they worked for them, did business with them or whatever, but very influential to a lot of the top leaders in the space. And you were no different. And so how do you help me understand a little bit? You obviously came out of school. Now, did you say that Double Positive was the first experience out of school? Probably not, right?
It wasn't even my first experience in the industry. And it would be unfair to not, thank some people that helped me get into the industry, even ones who I've had, occasionally kind of rocky relationships with. But I got in. So when I got out of school, I sold real estate. It was like that TV show Arrested Development. I sat in the converted garage of a model home, and in the West Valley of Phoenix. So people who don't know Phoenix, big boom town, real estate town in the early 2000s. I was at 123rd Avenue in Lower Buckeye, 115th Avenue first. And that place would look like, sort of any suburban sort of home builder driven residential place now. But back then there was a cattle yard on one side and a wastewater treatment plant on another side. And the wastewater treatment plant had, they would let their refuse off. They would open up their refuse tanks at 5 p.m. every night, which is usually when people get off work and come home shopping. So man, literally, when it didn't smell like shit from the cattle yard next door, it would smell like human feces from the wastewater treatment plant. And that was my job. And I got hired by a dude who is my neighbor now and a dear friend. He got out of the industry and he's an entrepreneur as well. There's just a lot of folks who became entrepreneurs who just kind of said to me, dude, you're going to end up there, man. I know, but anyway, he left the company. This guy's name is John Gillen. He left the company. It was a big publicly traded real estate company called Ryland Homes. They're still around today. And I got a new boss, and I brought an idea to my boss, which was kind of cool. I said, hey man, we got 200 lots left in this subdivision. The real estate market's white hot, but you only release like 4 or 5 lots at a time for me to sell. I want to hold an event where I invite realtors from around the city to come place a non-binding deposit down on behalf of their clients, and they have 48 hours to go firm on the contracts, or a week to go firm. I forgot what it was. And I was like, I think I can sell this whole thing out in like a weekend, all 200 lots.
Wow.
And the guy goes, well, we'd have to pay you like a giant commission. And I was like, yeah, that's the idea. That's what I was thinking about here. You realize you'd have gigantic revenues as well, and there's an impending bubble burst situation coming. And the guy was like, yeah, but we'll just never do that. Imagine what all of your colleagues would want if you had that success. And I was like, well, they'd want to sell 200 lots in a week. Like, what are you talking about? So I left, and I met a guy named that my parents knew, named Jim Grogan, who was the CEO of a real estate development company in Mexico, Loreto Bay. And I went to work for Loreto Bay, and I met a guy named Shane Jessup, who is a Canadian former member of the Navy in Canada. He was a legend in sales training and sales management in Canada. He provided training courses for all the major auto OEMs across Canada and dealerships. He owned a dealership in Canada. And he just, we were just destined to meet, became a dear friend and a mentor, and he taught me a lot about how to sell, right? How to work with people.
What year was
the first time I ever, this was like 04, 03. I was young, man, really young. But, talk about a cool company. I met my wife there. A couple of my best friends and I worked together there. And to this day, I see people that I worked with at that company, and I met with that company weekly, sometimes monthly. But it was just an incredible place. And I was a sales guy. I was the youngest one on the team. We were selling real estate in Mexico to wealthy Americans and Canadians. Man, I was hammering it. Like, it was just crazy. I didn't have a life. I was young. I was working crazy hours. And I remember, I'll hold back on the financial figures because it's kind of personal, but I remember I set a financial goal for myself that was outlandish, right? It was like a massive number to me. And my boss said, well, how are you going to get there? And I said, well, I'm going to work real hard. And he's like, not good enough, man. You got to be specific. So he's like, how many homes do you have to sell? And I said, oh, I don't know. So I think I need to sell X number of homes. And he goes, well, how many site visits is that? And I was like, well, I close about 50% of the people who come down and visit. And he's like, okay, great. So how many people who are going to sign up for a site visit is that? And I knew that about 30 or 40% of the people who signed up didn't show up. And then he's like, well, how many phone calls are you going to have to make that happen? And that's where it broke for me. He's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, why don't you start keeping a sheet to figure out how long it takes, how many phone calls it takes for you to get somebody to say yes to a site visit. So I started doing that, and I came back to him and I said, I got to make like 55 phone calls a day to get to that number. And so I did that. But then I was so dialed in and focused on it that I started closing at a better rate and selling bigger things. And then I'd tell people they couldn't come if I didn't think they were really legitimate buyers. And I hit that number, my goal for that year, by the end of February. And I was like, dude, this is crazy. And I wasn't, a slimy timeshare sales guy. I would tell people if I didn't think they should buy. The thing I learned was, if I communicated well and did a lot of really good listening, and I developed language that would help me listen, it would be a joy to work with me, because I would work with people who truly wanted what I had. And the only way to get it was to learn them. And that developed this kind of sense of empathy commercially for me, which was really important. Because I've always been really interested in other people. But it was a commercial opportunity, it was a commercial motive to be a good person and a good listener. And you shouldn't need one of those, but sometimes you do, right? And so it gave a commercial and financial reason to be a really active listener and a sort of deposer of people's dreams and goals, et cetera, et cetera. And the real estate market kind of dried up. And by that time, I had begun to interact quite a bit with the marketing team as to what leads were doing well for us, and what activities were doing not so well, and what a direct mail inbound call felt like or looked like versus an SEO lead versus a purchase lead from somebody else. I took that experience into another real estate project in Costa Rica. And then after that, a friend of mine owned an ad agency, and he asked me to come join him and help him run that. And then I met Frank Healy and Eric Flotman through a guy named Rex Williamson, who was an investor in their business, which was called Higher Ed Growth, and they needed a sales leader. So I came aboard and helped those guys for a number of years. And that's what really, my first LeadsCon was a couple weeks into being in that job. And we were very successful there. And that's what sort of led me to Double Positive. I'll skip over some of the rockier parts, but I've got a ton of respect for those guys. And
you know what you also skipped over, JT Benton, was I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here, that you are also an international television star. As I found out very quickly from learning to find out JT Benton, Google international house hunters and JT Benton. And I think you're going to be surprised at how clean cut this young individual was sharing this house.
Bleeded khakis. Not my best.
It's still available. I really believe it's still available out there. So please, I believe it's International House Hunters. Is that correct?
Yeah, dude, that's another podcast entirely. The shenanigans I got up to with that crew. I was all fired up, man. I was like 26 years old. I was young. Thought I'm going to be on television, and I legit, on the plane ride down, convinced myself that I was going to get offered a regular TV show. I was showing these folks around Mexico, and we were drinking too much, and we had a lot of fun. I'm not sure we made great television, but
well, for the small crew that worked for you in Tempe, it was incredible television. I'll just tell you that.
All right, so hang on.
Go ahead.
So I apologize, and maybe you go long, but or you just cut a bunch of this shit out. I don't know.
You keep going, man. It's rolling. Look, AC Evans from Drips, he burned bacon in the middle of our presentation and ran around his office, opening up windows and ripping the smoke alarm off and pulling the batteries out. And I kept it going because I loved it. So you keep going, brother.
You asked me about positive. You asked me about Double Positive. Man,
yes.
That was another one of those places where like just really cool, good people came together. I befriended really early on a couple of the folks on the leadership team at Double Positive. Sean Fenlon, who I talk to all the time. Joey Liner, who's like just a dear friend. And it was actually Casey Cook, who's just legendary, man. I mean, the guy's ability to do the big deal, the complicated deal in our industry, when most of the stuff that happens in this space is pretty transactional. And Casey helped me kind of come aboard, but Double Positive was at this like just booming time in their history. And I felt like I had gotten, traded to the Yankees, right? I was excited to put the pinstripes on, and I really did wear it proudly. And we built an incredible business unit there. We called it the mobile division, Mobile Positive, I think.
Mobile Positive.
Yeah. And, to Sean's credit, immensely, I mean, he really treated me like a GM. He'd say things like, "You're the CEO of your business unit, go."
Mhm.
For as long as he could keep that going, we did that. Over time, the board got more involved because the business was involved in a process, and I learned that that's not always as much fun when that happens. But I worked really hard. I got a ton of exposure, and I'm so grateful. I mean, it sort of launched. It really launched me. It was a trampoline effect, it was a springboard effect in my career. And when you look back on some of the people, Brian Ochiltree's business lead cloud. Brian Ochiltree was my boss at Double Positive. It was hard to think of him as a boss because we mostly told dirty jokes on the phone, and I got a lot of autonomy. Casey launched Cloud Control Media. John Nuclo, who was part of the media team, is now the president of that organization.
Now runs it, yeah, as a board member.
Joey Liner, who I thought would never take the jersey off, is over doing amazing things at DMS. Thomas Donahoe launched an agency that's been really successful. Jeff Gerber's out in the wild. My team today, I look around in my office, nobody's here because it can't be. Brett joined me at Double Positive. Bobby Furnish, who's on my team. Justin Guido. Chris Cox, who didn't work for us at Double Positive, but was on a core kind of client service side and customer success side of a business that served us. It was just a magnet for people and talented people, and it was a really cool community for a pretty long time there. Hey man, bear with me. I gotta shut my Slack down.
I had no idea what those 3 clicks were every 2 seconds. I was just like, this dude left his Slack channel wide open.
Yeah, man. All right. Anyway, so that's gone. So yeah, I mean, that time at Double Positive just taught me a ton, and a couple of our board members taught me a lot too. One guy, Stein Erickson, taught me a bunch about the online advertising space. So many of those people had been involved in advertising.com and AOL, and had kind of founded lead gen or founded some of this internet advertising space. And I just had access to them, right, man. I got to spend so much time with them. And then, through some of our corp dev stuff, I got to meet with really, really big kind of luminary people in our industry, and they became friends and they became mentors. And
is that where at Double Positive, is that where you entered into the LeadsCon ecosystem?
No,
or
that
was it back at higher ed?
I think I went to the second LeadsCon. I've only missed one ever.
Yeah, Joey's his claim to fame is that I've gone to the first one and every one since, with the exception of this year so far. But what's that?
Don't ever agree to go on a walk at LeadsCon with Joey, because you won't get anywhere. Everybody hugs him. Bad mother, as I like to say.
Got it. I'll keep that in mind. The reason why I ask about LeadsCon is that obviously that was the connection for me into this job, and I know that you're working your way up to how you came to LeadQual, and which is now LQ Digital. But at the same point, I remember walking around with you every time we ever go to LeadsCon, and you're a bit of a celebrity there in the sense that there isn't hardly anyone in the ecosystem that doesn't know you. I'd like to get a little bit more into LeadsCon a bit later into this, because I know that you're also running a component of that that I think has become very popular, and I think that I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. But at the end of the day, this ecosystem, I remember when I went to work for you and Paul Wu from University of Phoenix. Yeah. And I remember his first call to me was like, hey, Rob, glad to have you on. What do you know about lead gen? And I said, well, Paul, it's like in my DNA. I've been doing lead gen for 20 or something years. And he was just like, he goes, well, how much do you know about buying and selling of leads? And God, I knew nothing about it. And so it was interesting to be able to start learning about it at that point. And LeadsCon obviously has been immensely helpful in helping to educate that. But what has LeadsCon done for you? And I think that, as you bring it up to where we now are going to meet with LQ Digital and LeadQual, how did you like? How did that? What was the importance of that in the ecosystem and just the community that I think that I'm hearing you talk about? Because a lot of these names, they're all over the place. They're all there, and I see them every show, and it's great to see that you came from that kind of core and where it is today. So how does LeadsCon fit into all this?
Well, it's kind of like been a platform and a community that I just really decided, that I needed to lean into. I had only been in the industry for a couple of weeks when we went to Vegas and attended LeadsCon, and I met a lot of great people. And my observation was, this is the industry that I'm in, right? This is,
When did you realize that? Like, when did you say, oh shit, I'm in lead generation? Because you talked about generating leads back when you were selling real estate, but at that point in time, did you consider yourself in lead generation? Now looking back, probably yes, but at that time?
I did, but I didn't understand it. I mean, I had been in B2C, super high ticket item consumer sales, right? I was selling $400,000 lots in Mexico, right? So like, did I understand the mechanics and financial sort of flow that governed the lead gen industry, and like what was lead gen versus what was advertising? Not really. And I was just super curious about it, right? Because if you think about it all as like a funnel, like the lead gen space, that pure like I buy or sell a lead, is really small as compared to the online advertising space, which is, I buy, host, or convey inventory to other people who need it, sort of thing. That's a big space, right? That's like hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. And then we're in the like single billions in the lead gen space. But at the time I was like, man, this is cool. Like the internet's big, and I'm starting to understand it. And I can view from this platform that I'm on at the bottom of the funnel where transactions are taking place. I can view like what's really driving all this, which was customer acquisition. But I can also see up into the kind of the ether of like, how the economics work of getting an impression and what those risk models look like and how people successfully arbitrage and, what they need to do to make their economics work. And then I got really fascinated by all the super gnarly shit that people do to game the system, right? And I became obsessed with like trying to root out some of that bad stuff, because I got royally hosed by a fraudulent guy at one point in time. Did something really bad, and I was so blown away by the intricacy of some of the bad actors in the space.
Yep.
And I also, felt like I had a good community. But it was interesting. So just going back to LeadsCon as a whole, it was a community that I really wanted to lean into and make friends with and add value to and learn and understand, because I felt like I was going to be in the space for a long time, right? And so you can think about LeadsCon as like a company, right? Jay Weintraub formed a company that sold access to that trade show. I think of it more as a community, right? And
yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
And I still think that, there's a lot of people who work really hard over there to make a good show go. And I don't think it's a sort of one-dimensional or two-dimensional thing. It's not a thing you go to once or twice a year. I think it's a community.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I remember when Corey Smith, who is the connection between you and I and this position, he was my first, because I did not go to LeadsCon with you guys at LeadQual, and I had no idea really what that was. I just remember you guys coming back from it and hearing about Corey Smith quite a bit because I was coordinating with him. But I remember listening to him, and I asked him, what he felt about the lead gen community and what he felt about LeadsCon, and one of the things that came out of that was community. He felt like as many shows and industries that he's been connected to over his career, he had not seen a community that was so and he used a couple of words that, probably aren't appropriate, but what he said was, you can't burn a bridge in this space. You cannot burn a bridge without it coming back. But
Yeah.
if you can operate in this space and you can understand it and navigate it and become friends with those people that are in it and gain their trust, there
Yeah.
probably isn't more of a tight-knit community out there. And he felt that.
Yeah, to that point, at the time, there was really only one venue for it, right? And so you're absolutely right. If you acted out or made a fool of yourself, that was kind of going to be a stain on the back of your baseball card.
It's going to be remembered, yeah, for sure. And I told that when Heather came in, and I was having my first conversation with her. I just said, look, this is a community of people who trust one another. They can be staunch competitors in the space, but man, when they get together at this place, I've never seen such hardcore competitors going after the exact same fish actually coexist so evenly in an environment like LeadsCon. It's so cool to watch. I love it.
Maybe too much though, right? Like one of the things that I would say about the industry is that there's an awful lot of sort of cross-pollination that is disruptive, but by and large, that tightness and fabric of that community is great. And today it's not just LeadsCon, and I think that's cool too, right? So I'll say a couple things. One, I can't talk about LeadsCon as an entity or a group without just heaping praise at Warren. He's just been
Warren Pickett, by the way.
Warren Pickett, yeah, not Warren Buffett. He and I, yeah, but we're getting there.
We can talk about him later with all that money you made off of international home hunters.
Those annuities are still just rolling in the door. No, Warren Pickett is like one of the guys that was there from very, very early on, and he just does such a wonderful job stewarding that show. And I was just so impressed by how he handled such a tough situation around the postponement of LeadsCon. A lot of people really sought to hold that organization accountable for meta trends in the world, and I thought Warren was a wonderful face to the organization. So I'm just going to heap praise on my friend Warren. I'm also excited about some of the other stuff that's come out, right? So like, Michael Faree is a dear friend and was really excited to be at Lead Gen World, right? Obviously those two organizations or those two events are now somewhat competitive. But I think that marks the fact that maybe our space is growing a little bit, and it's a good space. And yeah, I
think the introduction of Lead Generation World was met with, optimism. I do not believe that it did anything to erode the other side of the fence with LeadsCon. I think that there is space for both. I think Mike has made it very clear. He has a very focused vision on where he sees Lead Generation World, and he does not see that as a replacement of LeadsCon. I've talked to him a lot about this, and he's very focused. He's very focused on the buyer side, which, I believe that, especially in my world, I absolutely understand the value of focusing on those buyers because they are the customers and they are the people who are making some of the decisions in this industry that are molding it. And so I know that Mike is focused on that and just delivering community. He is also focused on community. And so love both of those shows. So I want to go back to the journey that you had as you left Double Positive and you took on, I believe it was the CRO role over at LeadQual. Is that correct?
I think they called me. It was definitely not CRO. I think I was the SVP of sales and business, sales and marketing. Yeah. Anyway, it was that kind of a role. Good role. It was great company, man. I had a lot of fun there.
I did too. I enjoyed the short period of time. I remember, one of the things I did appreciate this. First of all, it was my first touch of a call center as well. And they own a call center in 2 locations, maybe 3 now, I don't know. But that was my first touch with a call center and my very, very first touch with something that was going to be my sweetheart for the next whatever years, and that is TCPA. I remember when Glenn talked to me about TCPA, Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and I had no idea what he was talking about. zero idea. And so it was the introduction of what ultimately would be the DNA of this position. And so I learned quite a bit in a very short period of time there. You know, what did that mean for you, that stint? Because you and I had a lot of conversations either over lunch or just in quick drives around town or something. And we talked about, you know, the temptations of offers coming in. And we talked about, you know, that drive of entrepreneurial, you know, that spirit of being an entrepreneur. And I knew at that point in time in your life, you were right on the cusp of it. And I knew maybe something needed to hit you or jolt it. And so LeadsCouncil to me was kind of that springboard of what had to happen to get you to the next experience, to get you to this experience. And I want to hear a little bit about that, if you could break it down for me.
Yeah, and I want to be really fair to people, because I really do believe, so, you know, we'll start with kind of the outcome. I was at LeadsCouncil for shorter than I should have been, and I didn't get to complete my work there, but I think the work that I did do there and that we did do there was very impactful on the organization. I thought it had a really good positive impact on the trajectory. I was recruited.
Are you there, JT? I got a frozen
CEO.
screen. There you go. Hey, JT.
I got a phone call from a friend who introduced
Can you hear me, JT?
Another company who was looking at taking it. Yeah, sorry. I was recruited.
Well, hold on a second. Let's see if you're,
which was an online internet marketplace.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep, now you're caught up.
I can hear you.
Okay, so go ahead. If I can hear you, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I at LeadsCouncil was, you know, doing great, and we were doing great and growing the heck out of it, and it was a lot of fun. And I got a call one day out of the blue that I needed to meet the CEO of this insurance company in Boston called Goji, and I knew them. I had done business with them previously, and I wasn't particularly excited about the opportunity. But then I met the CEO, a guy named Steve Kazarian, and the CFO, who then became president, a guy named Amit Basak, and they really, you know, put a pretty compelling pitch and offer together for me to come join as the chief revenue officer for that business. And I was convinced that a lot of my success in the past had come from some high-profile wins at Double Positive, and that investors there in that company had been, you know, excited about making inroads with me for future ventures. And when I looked over the investor panel at Goji, it was big organizations that had invested not in lead gen companies, but in like Twitter and Uber, and, you know, Bain Capital Ventures was on the board, and Thayer Street, and Matt Coffin, who's sort of an industry legend in our space, was on the board, and others. And I thought, wow, you know, if I can hang a win here, this might be the one, because it'll enable me to go raise capital. And if we can build this company and sell it or take it public, I might get some material wealth. So I left. That was a mistake. I can say that today. And I think we could have had a lot more good years at LeadsCouncil and been really successful, and probably gotten to better financial outcomes than were made available at Goji. And that being said, it was an important thing for me to do, because when Goji didn't go well, I knew what I needed to know, that it was time for me to go start my company, you know? And I don't think if I hadn't LeadsCouncil that I would have had that sort of jarring moment of seeing something fail. And that I don't think I would have been inspired enough or motivated enough to go start my own company. And so in the balance of it all, it was crushing to leave. The founders of LeadsCouncil are just awesome people.
I know you had a deep respect for them. I remember the day you said, let's go to lunch, and we went over to Firehouse Subs. I remember the day, and we sat down, and you said, hey man, I know that you've got some things going on with your family. The timing could not be worse. I understand that, but I've decided to take this job. I remember that conversation vividly because at the time I felt like this was not great news. But I am old enough and have been around the industry, and my life, experiences have allowed me to know that, look, tomorrow comes, things happen, things change, and you get on. And so, although it was a bummer for a lot of reasons. One, because I too also felt like we had some work that we hadn't done or finished
Yeah,
over at
absolutely.
LeadsCouncil.
And
We were just starting to ramp, right? Like we were just starting to like to get it. We finally got Guido on, and we were starting to get some conversations, and so when that day happened. But what I can say is that much like your story about going to Goji and ultimately getting involved with Workbook 6, and I want to get to that. What I can tell you is I would not be in this position. And although I loved working for you, this position is a good position for me. I love this position, and I love what I'm doing now. And I probably would not have changed any of that path, mainly
right,
because I know the outcomes today, right?
And sometimes things need to get shaken up. Growth opportunities don't always feel that way when they happen. I think there are a tremendous number of people who have been displaced by what we're going through right now in the country. And I just hope that some of them get to flourish and find new roles in the same way. You're absolutely right. We didn't finish the job there, and that was a bummer. And quite honestly, I don't want there's a lot of people, I suppose, are going to listen to this or watch this. And, to the folks that recruited me to leave that organization, I was thankful, and they're great friends today. And to the folks that I left when I did that, it was a super bummer, and I feel like I left them hanging a little bit. And we had a lot of really tough conversations to do it, but that company's been successful thereafter, and you've been successful thereafter, and I'm working on being successful thereafter.
And LQ Digital, hired a new CEO. They were able to go their direction, and I think they're very successful as well. So yes, we all learn, but you went to Goji, stayed there a short period of time, and then I remember the call. You said, "Hey, look, I need your help. I'm going to be doing this and this. Could you help me out a little bit?" And although I wanted to immediately jump back in with you, this was starting to take off, and I knew that I needed to focus on this. And that's when you talked to me about Workbook 6. And I remember we were working on logos. We were working on, the initial website, email addresses, all of those things that had to get done at the core of starting your own business. And I was just extremely happy, one, to be part of that. I was extremely proud that you called me back to ask me to help you with that, even though I couldn't do as much as maybe you had wanted at the beginning. But I was extremely excited about doing work again with you again. But I was more excited about seeing the potential of JT Benton finally unleashed with something that he called the shots. I mean, many times, when we were working at LeadsCouncil, you wanted to do it this way, but somebody else owns that company. They're the ones with all the risk. They're the ones that are calling the shots. And as much as what was that?
Let's be fair, because those guys gave us a lot of bandwidth, and we did
A lot of, yeah. No, I'm not saying that we were bound by any means, but ultimately they still were the shot callers. And what I knew about you was you wanted to run, and you had that ability to do it, but you needed some space to do it on your own. And I remember you calling me about Workbook 6. And so here we are on that doorstep of Workbook 6. Why
Sure.
Workbook 6? What happened there? Why the name? What did it mean? Why was it a name you just picked out?
I love telling the story. So there was a guy at Double Positive. So I started the idea for Workbook 6 is actually one I came up with in like 2011 or 2012. It was slightly different, but I was really befuddled by this industry's need to just hold back on truth and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it was very structural and called for. Like, if I'm buying media from this company and this company over here wants to know where I'm getting it, under the guise of compliance or something else, they could really just go around me. They could circumvent me. But part of it was like, man, why are you unwilling to share details about what you're doing with the people who are paying you? And why must I be? And so it really bugged me. And so I had this idea way back then to just create a completely transparent lead and media exchange. The idea was, instead of being a network and coveting those relationships and saying you can't know where this is coming from or have anything to do with it, it was to change the model, charge a different way, and connect them directly and say, have at it, right? You don't need me in the way. So that was kind of like a core founding principle of Workbook 6. And I went to go build the model. It was more media-based at the time than it was services-based in terms of the idea. And I went to go build the model, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was modeling this thing out, and I went to go save it, and I was like, oh, geez, I'm an idiot. I have been working on a company machine, and I could walk through the halls of this company at Double Positive and hug every single last one of them. But there was one guy that I didn't have a really good relationship with there. And he was a senior officer in the company, a technology guy. We were just sort of at odds. And so I remember being like, man, I don't want this stuff living on a company computer. So I'm just going to name it something obscure, and then I'll move it over someplace else and I'll get over it. Hopefully the statute of limitations on that shit's over. But anyway, I looked.
You can consult an attorney before I publish this, okay?
Yeah, it's been a long time, man. And yeah, anyway, water under the bridge. But anyway, I looked at the name that was like the file extension that was, or the file name that was suggested by Microsoft Excel, and it was workbook6.xlsx or XS or whatever it was. And I was like, dude, that's a perfect name because it doesn't mean anything. And at the time, I had just been, having these really awesome conversations with Jason Spivak and Drew Thorne-Thompson from Ring Revenue, which became Invoca. And they were like, you wouldn't believe the pain in the ass of rebranding a company. And their company had a great name. Ring Revenue was an awesome name, but it wasn't big enough. It wasn't all encompassing enough. It felt affiliate-y. Same thing with Lead ID and Jornaya. Yep. I was talking to Ross Schenken, who I think is an awfully sharp dude.
For sure.
And I was like, dude, this rebranding is crazy, and you guys are getting punished for like specifically naming your companies. So I'm just going to name my company something that everybody's like, what the hell does that mean? Because every entrepreneur and every sales guy is desperate for somebody to ask them about their company.
Yes.
And companies that are named really specifically don't get asked because they're already like self-explanatory. So I was like, I'm gonna name it Workbook 6 because a bunch of people are gonna ask me in the elevator, what it means. And boy, was I right about that, man. I can't walk 10 feet, at one of these shows without somebody being like, what the hell is your company? What Workbooks? What are you, Microsoft spreadsheets or whatever? So it was just a kind of a happy coincidence, and we just ran with it.
You put a lot more effort into that than what you were actually going to do day one. I kept asking you, what does Workbook 6 do? and every time I talked to you, it was a bit different every time. It morphed in. And tell me a little bit about that, because I mean, I think that's an interesting story. You wanted it to be, what's that?
I don't think that's fair. I always knew what this company would do.
Maybe I had the problem.
No, I mean, honestly, but you're not alone, man. There are a lot of people who are like, what the hell is this company? Because look, if you're in the lead gen space, right, you're either like an affiliate, a lead seller, a lead aggregator, a call center that calls leads, or you're a brand.
Right.
Or you're like a technology thing that like does the stuff in between that, right? Those are the companies. And I'm not any of those things. So like, we're sort of like the island of misfit toys. Workbook 6 is a partnership development company that basically wants the traffic provider, the eyeball like owner, right, that has access to lots and lots of human beings who are interested in buying products and services, and the brand that can acquire those customers to work as directly and in as unencumbered a way as possible. So we just try to live at the polls and bring them together and say, you guys should be working together, and you shouldn't have 15 different companies in between sucking out a margin. We just lost the whole audience, right? Because it's like 60% of this industry. But that's what I wanted to do. I was like, man, there's a lot of.
I scare the hell out of them every day, so you know what? I'm used to it.
Well, look, I mean, that was the idea behind the business. Now, we believe that not all that it's not all lead sellers or affiliates or marketing publishers or anything like that, but that other brands might have an ideal customer for you too, right? So if you're like a home security company and you sell home security systems and you're like, done, right? Why wouldn't you sell them a great home insurance product because they're eligible for a discount on it now, right? And why wouldn't you think about helping them, I don't know, secure their identity or their finances, or think about life insurance, or, you know, we think in Venn diagrams as well through strategic partnerships, but really our job is just to bring the parties together and help them find a way to commercialize a relationship that they can run directly, and we make that happen. Now, over time, that's evolved because we've learned a bunch, right? Some companies really want partnerships but can't manage them. Some companies really don't want a lot of partnerships. They want a lot of volume to run through a single partnership. So we've launched different products and services along the way. In fact, we've got a really, really big one coming that'll hit the wire here in a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the rundown on it.
Well, I you know, all I can tell you is that I've been involved with it from day one at some level, whether it's in direct involvement or some sort of observational involvement. And what you're doing, what is it that you're doing over at LeadsCon right now? Because I know that I program the Buyer Seller Summit for the afternoon of the opening day, but you do a partnership summit, is that correct?
We do a partnership summit. It's great. It's you know, going back to Corey and Warren. Corey's no longer with Access Intelligence, but Warren's still kicking strong and kicking butt. You know, when I started the company, it was kind of, you know, right within that sort of acquisition period where Corey had taken over LeadsCon. Jay was off doing InsurTech Connect and Contact.io. Jay Weintraub's another really close friend. And Warren came to me and he said, hey, like, I'm starting to see brand engagement slip. And by brand engagement, I mean, you know, the companies you would recognize as being consumer-facing brands, the big auto insurance carriers, the colleges and universities, the home security companies, the mortgage lenders, right? Were slowing down their propensity to attend LeadsCon. And I said, got it. And he's like, what should I do? And I was like, well, they don't want to go there and walk around with their badge on and just get, you know, sort of a barrage of affiliates saying, buy my leads, buy my leads, buy my leads. My leads are the best leads. You know, that guy's leads suck, whatever. They don't want that, right? They want more substantive content. And a really founding tenet of Workbook 6 is that those kinds of companies ought to be working together. These brands ought to be working together to kind of cross monetize and cross sell. So I was like, let me build a summit for you that attracts these kinds of companies. And man, we had a goal of getting 60 people there, the first one. And like 4 weeks out, I think I had 4 people signed up. And I was just like, we had 150 come through for that first one. And it grew and grew and grew and grew. And the brand attendance is like through the roof. And I think it's been a really positive thing for LeadsCon, who's done a bunch of other stuff as well to bring, you know, true brands, true end users forward. But we also started to see like affinity groups and associations come forward. We had Facebook speak at one of our things. We had Twitter involved in one of our sessions. We started to see some really notable, you know, large companies from beyond just lead gen show up at our event. And, you know, better lucky than good, right? So my whole thing was, I'm up there for 4 hours, and I'm going to recruit the best speakers I possibly can. And the promise of the partnership summit, which we're going to do in September, or I guess it's October. Is it September?
It's September 29th through October 3rd.
You heard it here first. At least we're going to do this again. But my whole thing is, like, maybe my favorite thing to do is be in your chair and just ask people questions and get them talking. I think it's a blast. So I kind of MC it, and I make everybody kind of subscribe to a single rule. We are going to enable a ton of commerce through the content that we create, but we're not going to be commercial ourselves. We're not going to pitch. Nobody goes to our event and goes, we got the best leads that you, no, it's just not that. In fact, those people don't even speak. It's brands talking about the challenges that they face in creating strategic partnerships and what are some best practices. And we do all sorts of audience participation. Like last year, we broke everybody out. We had like 300 people. We broke everybody out, and we broke down the funnel of a strategic partnership. And we kind of created these little councils of people to work on best practices. And then we brought the leaders of those councils back to lead a panel. So it was all like real time. Nobody was prepared, nobody could be, but it was also inclusive of the audience's participation. It's kind of cool, right? So I don't have any cost of like creating a trade show, which is a thing I always thought would be really cool to do. And I've got all these really plugged in people, and I get to do super cool stuff with them without having to have launched a trade show organization or do any of that stuff. And it's just been really fun. And so it's a little happening, right? And it's, again, I'll deflect all the praise. Warren's been incredible in supporting it and making it happen. Before that, Corey was a sponsor of it. And like the people who show up and agree to share of their learnings and their content are just cool people.
I know Heather O'Connell. I talked to her also about it, and she's very up on it as well. I mean, what I can say is that I've heard nothing but great things about it. How can anybody attend? Do they have to be a brand? I mean, what's the criteria for that?
No, anybody can attend.
Okay.
I think you have to be a LeadsCon registrant. Yeah, and
I know it's a bolt-on to the conference, right? I believe. What's that?
This year, now this was true in March, and I hope that it's true for the extended event or the actual event. But this year, in the past, you had to buy a ticket to be there, so it was like an extra couple $100, I think $250. This year, it's included in your LeadsCon attendance. So man, I want to fire marshal. I want like 1,000 people in this thing. Like I want to break the room, right? Because you don't have to pay extra to be there. And I have a lot of material, right? Because I've been writing jokes for March, and then March happened.
I'd hope that you would have dropped at least one on this call, but apparently we're at the end without one, so it's okay. I am totally kidding, buddy. Are you stopped? Are you done now? Did I offend?
No, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, you didn't hear what I said? I said I would have hoped you would have brought one of those jokes to this thing, but hey, you didn't.
Jokes, but then we'd lose all your listeners. The family show.
I can always edit. It's all right. Well, look, man, is there anything that we haven't covered about the life of JT Benton? I feel like I have now been through the book, chapter 1 through 12. And I know, I worked for you for a while. I've known you for a while. And I mean, we talk at least, a few times a month now still. And there were a lot of things today I just didn't know. I had not talked to you about. And so this has been super interesting for me.
No, it's cool, man. Look, I don't want to be so presumptuous that anybody wants to know much more about my life. I guess the one thing I would say is I'm just super grateful for where I am, what I've gotten to do. I certainly, I think, have missed some opportunities and have whiffed on a couple things, but we keep keeping on, and that's kind of the human condition. One thing I would like everybody to know is I don't think I have it all figured out. In fact, I know that I don't. And I would tell you that I take an extreme amount of pleasure in helping other people. I think the best way to get better yourself is to help kind of others work through stuff. So there's no doubt that some of the people out there who listen to this are probably being impacted by a flat out bizarre set of circumstances. And if you need help with anything, you don't need to know me to ask me. I would just tell you to please reach out, and I'll be there. So,
man, dude, you don't have to say much more, because here's what I will say about that comment. From day one, you've been that guy for me. You continue to be that guy for me. I love every time we get to connect, although you're always like, gotta go. Of course, 90% of who I talk to says that.
Usually because I've got to go take a leak. The truth is, here's another. I think I have an overactive bladder, because I do have. So you can. That's another thing.
You've been drinking moonshine the whole time. I don't doubt that you have an overactive bladder right now.
50 degrees here. Now, man, hey, listen, it's been a joy to watch you do what you do, and your successes are incredible, man.
Well, thank you very much, man. But I do believe that I can trace a lot of that back to the opportunity that you created for us. So, look, JT Benton of Tempe, Arizona, the Bentons of Tempe. I wanted to talk about your sister for a second, because I've seen her on TV. That's awesome, man. You guys are TV family, right?
I got two incredible sisters, man. I'm the dumb jock in the family, and I have an even cooler, just broader sort of like family. We're a wild bunch, man. My wife is incredible.
Kids, you got two awesome boys. I love those boys, man. They're awesome.
Miller got a perm yesterday. You want to talk about a COVID haircut? My 13-year-old, I came home, my 13-year-old's got a perm. His hair is curlier than your beard. So obviously, I'm not a guy that's got it all figured. I got a 13-year-old with a perm at home.
By the way, I grew up where I went to high school in the 80s. The back of that had a perm at one point in time.
Ooh, just the back.
Mullet perm, yes.
Waterfall.
There may be a picture somewhere in somewhere. I don't know.
Dude, you got to post it. Yeah,
I will try to find it. JT, thank you very much, man. This has been a pleasure. I know people will enjoy this. We're going to get this up and posted shortly, and I can't thank you enough for being our guest today.
Love you, buddy. Thanks for having me, man. I'll talk to you soon.
I love you too, man. Thank you.
Bye. I love it.
Is there any more? Please get it all out so that
beard is nice, and you growing it out on the neckline right here. I like that, man.
Look at this, man. This thing is continuing to peak epically.
My wife called it spouse repellent.
So keep going on the moonshine.